them a full 15 minutes. Let's just go ahead, Jeremy.
I can't hear anybody.
Did we lose you, Priscilla?
You can't hear anybody still?
I guess if she can't hear, we can't tell her. I can call her.
Oh, you can't. She's on her phone.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
What are you trying to call me about?
Oh, you can hear us.
Can you hear us now? No, we can't hear her.
Now.
Okay. All right, Jeremy, go ahead. Either you or Jamie, whoever's got.
I think we're going to tag team this.
All right, great.
And I apologize.
If that's easier, Jeremy, or you can.
If you don't mind sharing your screen, since I was just going to apologize, I got caught out of my office, and so I'm a little bit mobile today. So hopefully you don't mind me doing this from a parked car.
Oh, no worries.
Jamie's stationary, so.
Jamie, are you sharing your screen? I'll give you.
Yeah, that'd be great if you could.
Okay.
And we'll be brief. This is really just an informational item. We wanted to come before the Historic Preservation Board again.
Yeah.
I know we've been before you a few times when we were moving forward with our townhome project.
Right.
But the next phase of the project is the concurrent with additional townhome construction is renovation and restoration, reactivation, the 3 R's, not the 5 R's, I guess, but of the Lowell School, of the old R5 high school. And Jamie's going to bring up our presentation here, and we'll just talk through what we really want to do is just for informational purposes, both for this body and also for the public, just lay out what our work plan is for the next year in the short term, but then also kind of let you know where we're headed in terms of our longer term vision on the school.
Okay.
And I'll just start for the record, reiterating what we've said many times since we first got interested in this project, which is we are not tearing down the school. You'd be a fool to tear down a school that has such a historic and intrinsic value. So we really see it as an asset to the project overall, and fully integrated with the townhome phase of the project at full build out. So yeah, we just wanted to talk about some of the preservation work that we've been funded to do, that we're applying to do, and also talk about some of our activation efforts of open space activation and programming on the Great Lawn, we used to call it. Now we're trying to rebrand it as the Lowell School Commons, the open space area out in front. So you've seen this project before. We just wanted to include a slide that shows the full build out of the project. And you can obviously see the school to the west, townhomes kind of, we like to say, embracing the school to the east. And we've built and sold the first 4. We wanted to dip our toe in the water and test the market. Given when we started, the housing market was dramatically different than it is now in Grand Junction. We've gotten our approvals for the next 32, thanks to Chris's hard work over the past several months. And so we're about to start construction on the next 7 along White Avenue. So that'd be units 5 through 11. So we'll have built out White Avenue, hopefully by early 2022, if not the end of this year, depending on when we get started. Can you advance the next slide? And so there's the fourplex that we just wanted to show a quick before and after. This isn't a presentation about the townhomes, it's about Lowell School. We just wanted to show you that the difference the investment makes in the market rate residential on this public-private partnership with the DDA. And with that, I think, oh, yep, go ahead.
Can I ask you, did you guys find anything in the ground when you were excavating?
We did not. We looked at the materials that the school district had done around that kind of testing, and we didn't find any artifacts or anything like that when we were excavating. But there's no basement, so we don't excavate very far down. Mm-hmm. And what we were hoping not to find was uranium mill tailings, because none of the reports came up as uranium mill tailings. So we were glad that when we dug in, we didn't find anything. And I'm going to turn it over to our historic preservationist, Jamie Shapiro, who I know Priscilla and maybe others have already gotten to know a bit. And in addition to myself and Jamie, our other team members include John Potter with the Blythe Group. He's our architect and engineer, and he's our construction administrator for the funded preservation work that we plan to do this year. His offices are about less than a block away, so we couldn't think of a guy better suited to keep an eye on the contractors and make sure the work was done properly.
Yep, John's
Of course,
very.
Yep. Former military. He's going to keep them on their toes. And then Jamie, of course, a trained historic preservationist. I'll let him tell you a little bit more about his credentials and experience for this project. But one of his main jobs, among many hats he wears, is to make sure that the work is done to the Secretary of Interior preservation standards. That's both the right thing to do, but also it's not entirely altruistic. If the work isn't done to those standards, we don't qualify for the historic tax credits to sell at the end of the project. So we're motivated to do the work right. And then we have two advisors on the project. One is Western Slope guy, Charles Shaw. Charles and John Shaw purchased the Smiley Building in Durango, which is kind of an inspiration for this project. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then Jim Hartman with Hartman Eli Investments. He's a Front Range guy, and they've done a bunch of historic renovation and adaptive reuse projects in Denver metro area. I won't really talk about his projects, but you can look up some of that experience on their website, Hartman Eli Investments. So, and with that, I think I'll turn it over to Jamie, and he'll talk a little bit about the historic structure assessment and the history of the school and the work that we need to get going on as soon as possible.
Yes, I'll talk a little bit about the history. I started helping with this project like 4 years ago when I was doing my master's in historic preservation at CU Denver. Was interested in Eugene Groves. Actually was doing research on another one of his buildings in the Denver metro area. And I knew Jeremy and was kind of interested in this building. So that was how I came to it. And I work for the Department of Transportation, also doing historic preservation work and evaluating buildings for eligibility for the National Register. And then I also do some of this consulting work. So Eugene Groves, I got interested in him. He's, I think, one of the most interesting Colorado architects, if you've heard of him or know about him. I read that he has more buildings listed on the state register than any other architect. He started practicing in Colorado in 1914 and was designing things all the way into the 1960s. So he designed just a ton of buildings, including buildings on the CSU campus, high schools all over Colorado, Golden High School, Canyon City High School, obviously this school building. And then he's kind of was most known for some of his concrete houses. So he was both like a modernist architect and practiced in these other styles, Mediterranean revival, other kinds of Art Deco inspired styles. So some of the houses he was most known for in Denver had used a certain kind of patented concrete work where he would sculpt kind of the whole house out of concrete. So you may have read some of those stories. And one of those houses is up for sale now. The Nordland House is one that's famous. I'm forgetting the one that just came up for sale, but there's been some articles about him recently. So he's definitely a name that's kind of getting more interest among people that are interested in Colorado architecture. So Eugene Groves is definitely worth looking into more.
And that's his picture there?
Oh, can you still hear me or hear us?
Yeah,
Is
that was
that-
Eugene in the lower right corner, Priscilla. That's Mr. Eugene Groves himself.
Yes, Eugene Groves. He came to Colorado. He went to Harvard, also went to architecture school in Harvard, and then came to Colorado because he had TV. So one of those many people, and then ended up living kind of a long and fruitful career here. Definitely someone that have always been interested in. And this is one of the original drawings from 1925 that he did.
Oh, cool.
And we have that whole set. So if you all are interested.
Jamie, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say on that original drawing, we're hoping to print some of those out in a sort of a poster style and frame those in the hallways of the school. Some of those original hand-drawn renderings and elevations.
Oh, that's wonderful, because some of that old architectural drawings like that are, I mean, they're art in and of themselves, you know.
I agree. I mean, this was long before CAD, so it was all, you know,
Yes.
hand drawn. The drawings are beautiful, I think.
Yep.
And here it is in the 1930s, I think 1936. There aren't a lot of buildings, and I'm interested, Priscilla or Troy or others, if you can find other historic photos, that would be great. I did some research mostly at the library where they have the archive out there in Grand Junction.
The museum library?
Yeah, the
Okay.
museum library, exactly.
Well, and, you know, you might look in the Lumsden file, because that's who built it. Mr.
Oh,
Lumsden,
That's helpful.
and I sent you the article about him and that what it cost to build it. And he also built the Avalon and a lot of the prominent buildings around town. He was the contractor.
Oh, that's helpful.
So I sent you that.
Work newspapers account. I'll dig into that.
If Lumsden built it, Jamie, you may be able to determine where the stone came from. And if I had a suspicion, it would be from the Carpenter mine north of town. There was a Colorado sandstone claim up there that Lumsden belonged to, and he sourced all of his Colorado sandstone from that location.
That's really helpful. Beautiful masonry. And then
Yes.
some of the other things that I found that were interesting in the early history. So there was an original Lowell School before this one from like the 1890s or so, and Colorado Mesa College would meet in the basement of that school when it was first starting, or Colorado Mesa University. So that was interesting. And yeah, let's see. Won't go into too much detail. Here's some photos of the school after it became R5. And that was kind of an interesting story. I followed that story in the early 1970s. The school district originally was going to swap land with the county. And the county was looking at all different uses for this building. So they were looking at tearing it down and building a new library, or trying to repurpose the building, or tearing it down and just using it as a parking lot. So the school was almost demolished like in 1971. There's a bunch of articles about that. It ended up not being demolished, and kind of at the last second, there were kind of these back and forth negotiations, but the school district decided to save the building and use it for an alternative high school. Or I guess this was before that reuse, when it was still an elementary school. And then some early photos when it was listed. So it was listed on the National Register as part of the North 7th Street residential district. I think was the first district. And then the HSA, so our work, I helped with this HSA grant, was kind of the first serious. So after I helped with some of that initial research, we got a grant from History Colorado to do a historic structure assessment. Chad was the architect we worked with, Chad Harris. And
Jamie?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. This is Jeremy. I was just going to add that the DDA was the recipient of the grant, and Jamie and I, along with Chad Harris, as he mentioned, from Studio Laconic, former Grand Junction architect, we essentially put together the scope of work and secured the grant on behalf of the DDA to do this analysis. And Jamie, I'll turn it back over to you to talk more about it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Jeremy. So we've been working with the DDA, who has been the owner of the building. And basically in HSA, if you haven't worked with a historic structure assessment, the main purpose is to look at the building and identify the work that needs to be done and kind of prioritize it as what are the critical deficiencies, the serious deficiencies, minor deficiencies, and then routine work. And History Colorado funds these specifically for historic buildings that are listed on the National Register. So that was kind of, and that's kind of the first step, as I understand it, that they like to see in all of their grant programs. So they like to see an HSA, and then they'll fund other work, but that's kind of the baseline that they want to see. Jeremy, if you want to talk to some of these pictures, it just shows, you can see some of the cracking and spalling of the masonry and the foundation, and then other things as we go through some of these photos.
Absolutely. Would you mind going back to the previous slide just for a second, Jamie? I think you're still driving, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're just going to flip through some slides quickly, just to show you some of the items that were identified in that historic structure assessment. The bottom line is, what was it? I guess the date's right on there. The analysis was done summer of 2019. The report was finalized and accepted by the state historic group in fall of 2019. So all the costs I'm about to tell you are, at least a year and a half out of date and coming up on 2 years. And as you all know, construction costs have been going up, not just locally, but nationally. So the numbers that I'm going to share with you, we've been inflating, and relative to some of the bids we've gotten for the work, we feel like we're probably justified in that escalation. But the historic structure assessment identified nearly $500,000 in necessary work to the building. Some of that range, you can see the categories on the right-hand side. That ranges from just, deferred maintenance that's overdue, just routine maintenance to keep the building in a state of good repair, all the way up through deficiencies related to from mild to significant or critical, as you can see in that classification. And I'll just point out that not only is it maintenance and addressing structural issues like former water infiltration into the roof, not sure if it's an active leak or not, cracking on the foundation, which we'll talk about in a bit. Some of those building systems repairs, but it's also the preservation work as well. So some of the architectural features like the tile roof. But that report, like I said, identified about $500,000. With the run up in construction costs since then, and in talking with John and some of our bidders for some of these projects that have been funded, we think we're probably at least $750,000 of work as of today identified in the historic structure assessment. And of course, you all know, whether it's renovating a kitchen or restoring a 100-year-old building, once you start doing work, you always find other issues that need to be addressed, and the costs usually go up, not down. So from my standpoint, we've been thinking about this as a $1 million work plan to be accomplished over the next 10 to 15 years through historic preservation loans, historic preservation grants, a lot of sweat equity, some actual equity, and selling tax credits and putting that tax credit revenue right back into the building. So really just recycling all revenue back into the building to bring it up to a state of good repair and restore it as an asset to the community as soon as we can. So that's kind of just, I wanted to take a minute just to pause before we run through some of the projects. That's kind of the historic structure assessment by the numbers, and how we are using that HSA for short, HSA report as to guide our priority work. And with that, Jamie, if you can advance to the next slide. If any yeah, please interrupt if you have questions. We're just trying to be respectful of your time.
In that plan, have you guys also instituted a continued maintenance design for the building? In other words, because you're talking 10, 15 years, obviously there's other things that can deteriorate in that kind of time frame. And so is there a continued maintenance plan for the building as well?
It's a great question. We have not put together like an operations and maintenance plan yet. We've essentially been focused on the critical deficiencies that were identified, and the obviously like foundation and roof and those items, just to bring it up to a state of good repair. That's our first goal. We have run financial projections, which we've needed to qualify for the preservation loan, which I'll talk about in a minute, and also doing our own due diligence to find out how much money we might be losing by signing up this project, the order of magnitude. We do include a fairly healthy maintenance budget. It does have some tenants. It's currently only 1/3 occupied, so 2/3 vacant. But we've been really, I would say the short answer to your question is the maintenance plan at this point in terms of long-term maintenance cycles and funding is to get the building fully occupied.
Okay.
So that it's self-sufficient from a rental revenue perspective to be able to invest in that sort of ongoing routine maintenance.
That's important. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to have that revenue stream in order to maintain the building. That's certainly important. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Because otherwise we'll be in a position where we're deferring maintenance and then we're solving problems from yesterday, but creating problems for tomorrow.
Right.
And that's just chasing your tail. But it is a catch-22 to follow up on that question. In order to drive tenant interest and in order to drive a rent premium to generate that maintenance revenue, we need to start investing in the building. And so it's kind of we're creating a virtuous cycle is what we're trying to do at this stage. And anybody else on the board, please interrupt if you have questions. We're just going to run through these quickly. So we did apply for and receive a historic preservation loan from a private entity, the Colorado Historic Foundation, based in Montrose and Denver. They are funded. I don't know exactly where the endowment comes from. Jamie or others on this meeting may know, but they essentially loan money at attractive rates to projects that are historic landmarks or contributing structures that are good candidates for restoration work. So we received that grant in January. We put together the work plan. We're getting updated bids. You saw the foundation has some cracking. It has some spalling of the concrete. That all needs to be addressed before it gets worse. A lot of that damage to the foundation is coming from around the perimeter of building is not correctly graded. And so water, when it rains, that combined with the deteriorating and failing gutter and downspout system causes water to accumulate near the building. You can see in the lower right-hand corner some of that foundation stem wall deterioration, which is from ice, snow, and water not being properly sloped away from the building, shedded away from the building. Next slide. Of course, one of the key features of the building is that sort of Mediterranean or Spanish clay tile. You can see in some of these photos, and again, it's just kind of a montage to give you a sense of the condition of the building. Some of the existing tile is cracked, deteriorated, needs to be replaced. Some of the school district, I think, removed some of the tile at some point, probably because they were seeing, water infiltration, and they maybe took the path of least resistance in terms of cost and put on asphalt shingle in some of the places. You can see that in some of these photos. Obviously, that's not in keeping with the original character of the historic building. So we want to put in, if we can find original tile from that era, we're making an effort to find it, and it's almost like fishing. We had a nibble about 3 months ago, but we didn't have the approval on the grant yet, or excuse me, on the loan. So I didn't want to pull the trigger in terms of $25,000 of 1930s era tile. So unfortunately, that lot sold, and now we're on the lookout for original tile. If anybody has a source, we're working with our advisors to track that down. But if we can't find original tile of the era, then we'll use modern tile, but a close replica of the original historic tile. So it'll still look a lot better than asphalt shingles on the hips of the building. Mm-hmm. Next slide, Jamie. Lighting. Obviously, the building is not currently lit, as it would have been through the decades, excuse me. And also, there's until we added some solar lighting last summer, excuse me, there wasn't much architectural lighting on the building. Just the entryways were lit with that security lighting. But we included in our grant, keep saying grant, our loan application, not only replacing these old Cobra heads that just got kind of stuck onto the corners, and these kind of rest stop lighting fixtures that are in the entryways, not only replacing that with like more historically appropriate fixtures, but also doing an architectural lighting scheme as we begin to invest in the building, we really want to highlight the beauty and architectural components of the building. So we'll work with a local lighting designer on that. Gutters and downspouts I mentioned. You can see the gutters are rusted out, rotted out. Downspouts have been kind of jerry-rigged. It's a kind of a Frankenstein system. If you keep going on the next slide, Jamie. Just a kit of parts. You've got 8-inch PVC that shoots off, attached to metal, attached to, whatever material was that contractor had available that day. So we want to pull all that off. We want to put on original gutter, a new gutter and downspout system, and combined with the regrading of the perimeter of the building, we should be able to shed water away from the building. And one of the problems you also have with these rusted out gutters is when they fill with snow or ice, and then as that melts, it's essentially rust colored water that hits the building and creates some staining on the masonry. So it's an example, to your point on the importance of maintenance. It's an example of, by not maintaining the building, we create more problems that are more expensive to repair than just the gutter replacement. And we're toying with the idea of like a copper gutter. We know with the humidity being not so high in the Grand Valley, it won't develop that green patina that you see a lot with historic buildings in other places, but it does oxidize a bit and turns a nice brown color, which would, I think, complement the masonry of the building, and also the brown pro panel roofs on our townhouses. And so we're trying to tie some of those colors and features together between the school and the townhouse design, which is more modern. Next slide. And again, just keep interrupting me or interrupt me if there's any questions. One of the other projects we put into our loan application is signage. We understand it's been called the R5 High School for a long time, but there is an active R5 High School, the new R5. We want to revert this back to the Lowell School, its original name. And of course, you have the plaque on the building, but the way it's positioned, it's kind of facing, if you're standing at the front door, it sort of faces you in the alcove. You can't really see it from the street. So we want to do some interpretive signage, probably along the sidewalk on 7th, which will complement the existing district signage in terms of color scheme and fonts. Tells you a little bit about the architect, about the building, about the uses of the building over time, the architectural styles. And so passerbys on the 7th Street sidewalk can see that sign and be able to understand the building's importance in the community. And then, of course, just for deliveries and whatnot, we'll probably replace that sign above the mantle if we can figure out a way to the mantle, excuse me, the arcade above the front entrance. If we can figure out a way to do that in a historic sensitive way. But likely that R5 high school sign, which is just particle board, I think it's OSB tacked up there, is going to come off. And we'll hopefully replace that with something historically appropriate that says Lowell School.
Is that the location of the original sign for Lowell School?
What's interesting, Priscilla, is Jamie and I have been like with a magnifying glass looking at these photos from the original construction. I don't think there was any signage above the entranceway. I think it's a function of like modern usage where deliveries and drop-offs, somebody needed to know they were in the right place.
Okay.
So we may not have to do that. Maybe we'll figure out a way to do that with freestanding signage fronting the sidewalk. But we'll work with ComDev and their group, signage permit, location size, and make sure it's all historically appropriate and also kind of aesthetically ties together with the district signage that the city designed and fabricated.
If you find something, please let me know, Priscilla.
Well,
and also, real quick, I did see that it does say Lumsden as a builder, Winterburn and Lumsden. So you're right on that.
I'll keep digging.
We appreciate it. So all of those projects we just ran through, those are funded through the already approved historic preservation loan from Colorado Historic Foundation. So we anticipate ownership of the building transferring from the DDA to us in the next few weeks. As soon as the transfer happens, then the loan will close. Obviously, we have to show title to the school to be able to close on the lending to improve the school. And even if we didn't as a lender requirement, I think that'd be prudent on our part not to start investing money into the building at too large of a scale until we do have it into our ownership as part of the overall project. So I didn't mention this at the beginning, maybe Jamie did, but the preservation loan is funded at about $170,000. And so we're going to be dropping that amount fully into the building in the next 6 months based on John Potter's schedule. And I think that'll be the largest private investment, obviously, in the building ever, but I think it's the largest investment of any kind, public or private, since the school district redid the bathrooms and the HVAC in the, I want to say, early aughts. So at least a decade or two. So anyway, those are all the projects we just ran through that are funded by that loan, already approved. We're just waiting for the school to transfer to be able to start investing and bringing this building back up to a state of good repair and really, polish it as a gem, the gem of a building it is. And then there's some other projects that just need to get done. Like on the left, the ADA, Americans with Disability Act access is not working currently, and that's not good, both from an ethical standpoint, but also legal standpoint. So that's a top of our list in terms of just not really related to historic preservation, but let's get the access improvements done that need to get done so everybody can get into this building. And then on the right, you see after that early ice storm that we had, snow and ice storm in late October, I believe it was, some of the tree branches just spontaneously snapped off under the weight of the snow and the ice. And so we were surprised to see that because we were under the impression that the landscaping was being maintained for, not just mowing the grass, but, maintaining the health of the trees, some of which are mature trees that are original to the construction of the school and are part of in my opinion, the historic character of the school. So we got an estimate on that, and turns out there not only are some of the trees needing pruned for the health of the trees, but also there are some trees that are creating some level of public safety risk in terms of overhang into public right of way. Normally, a developer wouldn't give a presentation on the record talking about these things, which are creating legal or legal liability or risk, but we're being transparent that we intend to fix these ASAP, and we're applying for a grant this summer, which would be approved in the fall, which would fund some of this work, but we're gonna move forward with the work regardless once the ownership transfers, because we think this is important for a public building that's been in the public sphere, and we want to continue to serve the public. We need to make sure that the building is safe and accessible to all. So, and hopefully we'll get funded through the grant and get reimbursed for some of that work. The other major piece, and we're wrapping this up in terms of projects, the other major piece is the masonry. There's significant deterioration of the masonry, whether that's the mortar that's holding the bricks together, whether it's the staining of the bricks I mentioned earlier from lack of cleaning or from rusty gutter water, rainwater hitting the bricks over time. And then there's also some issues where at some point the previous owners attempted to do some repairs of the masonry work, and you can see in the lower right hand corner both the mortar color and the brick don't really match. You can see how it's kind of patched in there. Mm-hmm. And overall, that just contributes to the overall kind of, I would argue, dowdiness of the building. When you can reach up and almost pull a brick out of the exterior wall, or when it looks like kind of a hodgepodge quilt of masonry or stained brick. When you see a new brick restoration like the Avalon Theater as an example, or the Smiley Building in Durango, that building just shines because the brick's been polished up, and we want to bring that same level of quality and maintenance to the Lowell School as well. And so that'll be part. Oh, go ahead, Priscilla.
That brick looks like Delta brick.
Interesting.
And they're all stamped. I'm wondering if that one on the bottom left, if that brick looks like it's coming out, if it says Delta brick on it.
Well, we might have to check.
a good
after
question.
this meeting. Please don't everybody rush over and pull a brick for check for themselves. Let's pick one. Let's pick one. How about that one that you pointed out, Priscilla?
Yeah,
So
coming out anyway.
yeah, no, that's a good point. And we want to, again, we want to find the, that was part of the historic structure assessment was, how to make sure we get the historically appropriate mortar color and brick, brick composition and not just whatever's available at Home Depot that day. This will all be done to the Secretary of Interior standards. Then there's some little stuff like painting. So, a lot of the wood elements of the building are in serious need of painting before there's any more deterioration to, the mountains on the front doors or the window ledges and trim around the windows. The school district did replace the original wooden windows with vinyl windows. It's 6 to 1, half a dozen another. There are trade-offs. They're double paned windows, so it's much more energy efficient. But it would have been ideal if we still had those original wooden windows that we could polish up and restore. I'll just tell you, on the Smiley Building, they replaced every single window in that building. I think it was a total of 200 windows over the course of a decade, and they put back wood windows. That's on our to-do list down the road once these vinyl windows reach the end of their useful life. But in the meantime, we want to at least do the basic maintenance of keeping the original wood elements painted so that they don't deteriorate. Next slide. Okay, and I think I'll just flip through the rest quickly without much commentary. But the projects that I just went through are projects that are speculative, that we are applying for grants to fund. And then if the grants aren't funded this year, then we'll take our tax credits from the loan funded projects that we talked about at the top of the presentation. We'll sell the tax credits, and that revenue will pour back into the building for the projects that I just mentioned. The other aspect of this building, besides public access and tenants, public safety and tenants that serve the public, community serving uses, we want to activate the lawn, what we call the Great Lawn or the Lowell School Commons. We want to activate that as a new downtown park. As many of you may know, we formed a metro district as part of our townhouse development to fund infrastructure. And one of the services the metro district is authorized to provide by the city, the IGA that we have with the city, intergovernmental agreement, is open space and recreation. When we first looked at the numbers on this building under its previous ownership and saw that in the summer, this great expanse of grass costs $1,000 to water per month. Not to mention the maintenance of mowing and fertilizing and all of that. So, if you're going to have a bunch of a big front lawn, you might as well get some use out of it, whether it's your house or a public building. So we want to use the metro district to essentially dedicate this space into perpetuity as open space for the public use. We want to program it. We want to allow members of the public, the townhome buyers, tenants of the school to reserve it or a portion of it for events. We have a tenant that's in the school building now that wants to teach fitness classes open to the public. We are working on getting a tap room into the building for a longer term lease, and they would potentially have a serving area out front. We are negotiating a lease with a local florist, high-end florist design for weddings and other events. And I'd love to see some weddings out on that building once we start polishing it up and kind of create some synergy there between the tenants and the public use and the activation of the lawn. So that's part of our vision, and it's not that we came up with the idea. It's pretty well-traveled territory. There's a lot of public open space that's provided by private entities in big towns and small towns. So we're hoping to do that and legally protect it as open space as well, dedicate it to public use into perpetuity. And then our last thing we'll talk about as part of that open space recreation park use is our landscape concept developed by local landscape architect Rob Breeden with Envision Design. He came up with the concept of community gardens rather than just planting the bare minimum trees and putting some grass in the planter strip, or even worse, maybe just throwing some rock out there. He came up with this community gardens concept, which It creates garden plots across the property, creates bioswales that is irrigated with rainwater partially, so it reduces our water consumption. And that's also part of our concept. We've been kind of doing some beta testing on that, thinking through some designs that we can do early on. But if you go to the next slide, Jamie, you'll see similar to the open space, this vision, or this slide shows our vision on the community gardens at full build out. So, you know, these historic preservation projects, they don't make money. The trick is to try to lose as little as money as possible and to build value over the long haul by investing money into the project and attracting people who see the vision and want to be part of building that vision over a 5, 10, 15-year period. So this won't happen overnight, the community gardens, the open space, but it will happen. We're persistent and we follow through with our commitments. So we're not going anywhere on this building. We recognize that there's a valuable stewardship role that we have signed up for, and we're going to follow through on that stewardship role and our commitments for the same. So I think that was the last of our slides. Oh, this is just the Smiley Building I mentioned a couple of times. Charles and Lisa Shaw, and then John Shaw, Charles's brother. They bought the Smiley Building 24 years ago, and you can Google and there's some articles about the history of it. It was boarded up. The school district didn't know what to do with it. They sold it as surplus property, but they got some proposals they didn't like. The Shaws came in and put a proposal together that was more of that stewardship model, that long-term vision that I just mentioned. And if you go to the next slide, nearly 25 years later, it's one of the coolest buildings in downtown Durango, one of my favorite spaces to be. On the left, you see some cafe seating, patio seating. Those are those windows I mentioned, all 230 windows, I think, that they replaced over a period of a decade as grant and loan funding allowed. You can see the beautiful masonry work in the lower right-hand corner, how it's been cleaned up and restored. Next slide. And then you can also see how they've activated their outdoor open space with classes, with events, with dining and community events and weddings. And so that's really our vision, is to essentially create a brand new public park as part of the townhome development and linked to the townhome development, but at no cost to the taxpayer through the Metro District. And so last slide, there's the before Smiley Building. Here's the after from the same viewpoint, 25 years later. And we're starting in a better place with the Lowell School. It's certainly not boarded up and falling down, but it is 2/3 empty and in need of some serious repair. So we're starting in a little bit better place, but we still have a long way to go, and look forward to your feedback and support in helping us get there.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Jamie, for that information on the building. Yeah, we certainly look forward to be rejuvenated. It's a lot of work and a lot of money and a lot of investment there. We appreciate that.
Thanks so much.
Yes,
And we're
we do.
open.
More questions?
Yeah, Priscilla, I just wanted to respond before you ask your question. We're open to any feedback you have, any thoughts. Obviously, it's a building that's been, like I said, publicly owned and serving a public use. Even though it will be transferring to private ownership, the upside is it'll be paying property tax for the first time in its existence. But we also want to preserve that public facing and public serving nature of the building. We're not gating it. We're not fencing it. It's not going to be a private club. We want it to be part of the community for years to come, for decades to come. Go ahead, Priscilla.
I just want to know what's in the basement.
Well, let's do a tour sometime once we can all get together in person. So the southern end of the basement has the boiler room.
Okay.
And there's on the back end of the school, there's some stairs leading down that leads you to the boiler room. There's also, if you look on the northeast corner, there's a few little almost looks like an oven door or that slides out, or a wood fireplace door. That's where the horse-drawn coal carriage would pull up, and they'd shovel the coal down the chute, and it'd pile up down in the bin next to the boiler. So that old boiler's still in there. It almost looks like I've heard people describe it. It looks like a pizza oven, or some people a little more morbid have said a crematorium.
Yeah.
We don't know what we're just trying to get the classrooms occupied and start making improvements to the exterior. At some point, and this will probably be triggered by our tap room tenant, assuming we can get that approved and get them signed up for a 20-year lease. We'll need to start putting our interior renovations plan. And I'll tell you, I'd like to make use of that boiler room in some way, because it does have egress and ingress directly to the back of the building. I was thinking maybe it's a speakeasy called Detention. But I'm open. We're open to your ideas on what we could do with it.
No, were there any other relics down there?
You know, we found a little bit of roof tile that's stacked up, and I'm guessing, the contractors thought this is probably too valuable to throw away. Let's pile some up here in the basement, but not enough to fully re-roof the asphalt shingle portions. Let's see. There's I think some storage from tenants that have pulled things out of their classrooms that were, removable, like a bulletin board that wasn't historic that had been tacked up. I haven't done too much digging in there, but I think we do need to schedule a tour maybe as part of, I understand there's a North 7th Street historic tour every so often. And so maybe we can start doing some improvements and get plugged into that tour and see what surprises lie in the boiler room.
Well, one little tidbit I found out during my research was that, the Carnegie Library was on that corner there. And I sent Jeremy the Sanborn map showing where the library sat and where the old jail sat. And the library and the school were both up at the same time. They didn't tear down the Carnegie Library till 1941.
So you're telling me, Priscilla, Jamie probably knows this. I did not know this. You're telling me the Carnegie Library was on that site and was torn down?
Yes, in 1941.
Because I did not know that. So you've educated me, at least. Jamie may have already known that. But when we saw the original plat, before we replatted this thing, the original plat still, it named the quadrants, school, library, jail, and something else. I forget. It was a name. The parcels were named, not numbered. And I just thought that was where things were supposed to go. I didn't realize they'd actually built some of those things.
Sometimes they called it the library block. Sometimes they called it the jail block until they built Lowell. But that's why when you were building those first townhomes, I thought, oh my gosh, I hope they're metal detecting that ground.
I will definitely share that research that Priscilla shared with me, Jeremy.
Awesome.
There's some more interesting stuff.
Yeah, I'm just a dumb developer these days, but I was a history major in undergrad and a planning major in graduate school. So I just like these old buildings, and I like to weave them back into the fabric of the city versus the alternative. It's hard work figuring out what modern uses can reactivate the building and generate enough revenue to restore it to its original splendor. But we're really going to be looking. We've already reached out to Priscilla and the Historical Society, and looking to this group to be a partner on this and help us get the word out and help us achieve that long-term vision. We'd like it to be one of the first places you think about bringing visitors when they come from out of town. Come to the tap room, have a beer on the lawn. Maybe you're visiting one of the tenants or taking a class. We really want it to be almost like woven into the fabric of the community, not just a vanity, a construction project. So we'll look to partner with you however we can on that.
It's a wonderful vision.
I agree.
And historically speaking, I am pleased.
Great. Thank you.
Well, is there anything else that Jeremy or Jamie would like to add?
I was going to add that Joe Hatfield, who was on this call, I don't know where he went, but he's actually the one that organizes that tour usually, Jeremy. There he is.
Oh, that's Joe. Can we connect? Thank you, Chris. Joe, can we connect offline? We'd love to be. I know the school is part of the tour. We'd love to plug in and maybe help sponsor and see how we can maybe even host not just a stop on the tour, but maybe be the starting and end point. And the educational use of the building in the past, we do want to continue with many of the tenants having some educational component, whether it be a design studio or fitness, wellness classes. So if we can even host lectures or classes or things like that related to Grand Valley history, we're happy to do that.
We've been kind of in a cycle where we do a tour about every 3 years. We're a little behind now. We were going to do one last year, but obviously got canceled. This year is probably not going to be a good year for it either. We usually do it in May. So last time we did a tour, we did utilize the building. It's nice to have parking and bathrooms available over there, which we hadn't really been able to do before. So I can see that building from this window behind me, so love everything you're saying about it. So.
Oh, great. And yeah, happy to continue that role, hosting, whether it be parking in the near term. That'll start to go away as we build out townhomes of the next 2 or 3 years. Yeah. But the restrooms for sure. And the way we look at that lawn is 15,000 square feet. You can do a pretty good socially distanced event on that amount of turf. So if there's any way we can figure out an alternative way to host something in May on the lawn, be happy to do it.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Well, Jeremy, Jamie, thank you for your presentation today. It was very enlightening for us to be updated. I appreciate it, and Priscilla did as well, and Kristen. And so yeah, thanks for that.
Thanks for having us.
I apologize for the rest of the board that they were not able to attend and be enlightened as we were, but
no, appreciate you taking the time to put us on the agenda, and reach out anytime, any questions, or if you hear concerns in the community. And if maybe we'll catch the other board members, we'll come back before you. Maybe we'll get some of these projects underway and give you an update on the status.
Certainly. Yeah, we would always like to hear what's going on over there. I appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Take care.
I did want to point out that we are recording too, so the other board members can watch it later.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's true. So we have Mikhail joining us, I think, but we still don't have a quorum. So are you able to do this next month, Joe, or?
I can. You had mentioned that you weren't going to be available.
No, right? But I can get someone to cover. I don't want that to delay you.
I don't remember how it works. Do you guys work with proxies? I mean, if someone can't.
We have on some things, yeah.
I think I've got a lot of custom work that's going to have to be done.
Yeah,
and so
we'll try to reach out to them and try to make sure we have a quorum next time. I had not heard from anybody that they weren't going to make it today, so kind of surprised, but I think Greg and Mikhail both said they had some last minute things come up, so we'll try for, I don't know what the date is in April.
Exactly.
Yeah, mine was disciplinary action with students.
Can't control that for sure.
No.
So yeah, if you're still available, Joe, I will make sure that somebody here at the office can cover the item for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's April 6th.
Link.
April 6th. Okay.
And I'll be here.
Okay. All right.
Well,
so
at this time, do anything official,
No.
I guess we'll go ahead and adjourn.
Thank you.
But thanks everybody for attending, and we'll see you in April.
Try again
Adios.
next month.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.